burning remains of the Althari capital city painted the sky orange and black. Ambassador Kialara pressed her 4 hands against the cold metal floor of the escape pod as it shook violently. Through the small window, she watched her homeworld die. The Vextar ships hung in the sky like dark metal clouds. They had come without warning 3 days ago. No demands, no negotiations. Just death. The bioweapons they dropped turned the beautiful blue oceans into poisonous soup. The green forest became twisted black wasteland. Millions of her people were already dead. Ambassador, we need to go now. Her pilot, a young male named Doric, worked frantically at the controls. The orbital defense platforms are falling. This is our last chance. Kialara nodded but could not look away from her dying world. She was the last government official alive. The responsibility felt like a mountain on her shoulders. The escape pod's engines roared to life, pushing them away from the planet toward the stars. Behind them, the Vextar continued their work. These creatures looked like giant insects with razor-sharp claws and empty black eyes. They had evolved as predators on a harsh world. For them, killing was as natural as breathing. They had already destroyed 4 other species in the past 2 years. Where do we go? Doric asked as they cleared the planet's atmosphere. The Galactic Council Emergency Station at Kepler 442, Kialara replied. Her voice was steady, but her hand shook. We must warn the others. The journey took 6 hours. When they arrived at the space station, Kialara found chaos. Ships from 17 different species crowded around the massive structure. Everyone was talking at once through the communication channels. Fear filled every voice. High Counselor Thresh, an elderly leader of the peaceful Mirren people, met Kialara at the docking bay. His large, gentle eyes showed deep sadness. My dear friend, he said in his soft voice. We heard about Althari Prime. I am so sorry. There's no time for grief, Kialara said firmly. The Vextar are coming here next. We must prepare our defenses. Thresh's face fell even more. What defenses? Our ships carry no weapons. Our people know nothing of war. We evolved as plant eaters on peaceful worlds. We have never needed to fight. This was the great weakness of the Galactic Council. For millions of years, all the member species had evolved without dangerous predators. They had learned to solve problems through talking and sharing. The idea of killing another thinking being was foreign to them. Then we must learn quickly, Kialara said, or we will all die. The council meeting began immediately. Leaders from 17 species gathered in the great chamber. Each one looked afraid. The Vextar had already proven that their peaceful ways meant nothing against pure violence. We could try to negotiate, suggested Prime Minister Valera of the Centaurian Republic. She was tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected light. With what? Asked General Toom of the Rigel Defense Force. He was the closest thing the council had to a military leader, but his force was really just a police organization. They want us dead. There is nothing to negotiate. Maybe we could hide, said another voice. Find worlds they cannot reach. They will find us eventually, Kialara said. The Vextar are excellent hunters. They tracked down every survivor on my world within hours. The debate went on for 3 hours. Every idea was either impossible or had already failed. The Council's small security fleet had tried to fight the Vextar once. 15 ships went out. None came back. Finally, Thresh stood up. His old voice carried across the silent chamber. There is one option we have not discussed, the quarantine zone. Everyone began talking at once. The quarantine zone was an area of space that all Council species avoided. The worlds there were considered too dangerous for civilized people. High gravity, poisonous air, violent weather, and worst of all, predator species that had never learned peace. The stories say there are beings there who know war, Thresh continued. Creatures who evolved fighting and killing. If such beings exist, perhaps they could help us. You want to make a deal with monsters? Asked Velara. What if they are worse than the Vextar? Then we die either way, Kialara said quietly. But at least this gives us a chance. The vote was close. 9 species voted yes. 8 voted no. It was enough. Dr. Nix, the station's communications specialist, worked through the night to build a transmitter powerful enough to reach the quarantine zone. She was a small furry creature from a world with 6 moons. Her tiny hands moved quickly over the complex controls. "This is dangerous," she said as she worked. "If predator species receive this message, they might see us as easy prey." "We are already prey," Kilara replied. "The question is whether we find a protector or another hunter." The next morning, Dr. Nix activated the transmitter. The message went out into space, traveling faster than light toward the unknown regions where civilized people feared to go. "Unknown species of the quarantine zone," the message began. "This is the Galactic Council. We are 17 peaceful civilizations under attack by the Vextar Empire. They are killing our people and destroying our worlds. We have no weapons. We have no armies. We are dying." Kilara had written the next part herself. "We know you are different from us. We know you understand war. If you will help us fight, we will share everything we have. Our technology, our knowledge, our resources. Please respond. We are running out of time." The message repeated every hour. For 2 days, there was no answer. The council members grew more desperate. Reports came in that the Vextar had finished with Althari Prime and were moving toward Myron space. On the 3rd day, something changed. Dr. Nix was monitoring the communication equipment when every screen suddenly lit up. A signal was coming back from the quarantine zone. It was strong and clear, much more advanced than anything the council had ever seen. "Dr. Nix to the council chamber," she announced over the station's speakers. "We have a response." Everyone rushed to the communication center. The signal was coming from a star system the council had marked as extremely dangerous, do not approach. The beings there called their world Earth and themselves humans. The voice that came through the speakers was calm but firm. It belonged to someone called Captain Marcus Reed. "Galactic Council, this is Terra Fleet Command. We have received your message. We understand your situation. We have been monitoring Vextar activities in your region." Kilara felt hope for the first time in days. These humans had been watching, they knew about the threat. "We are prepared to offer military assistance," Captain Reed continued. "However, you should know that our methods of warfare may seem extreme to peaceful species. We evolved on a world where everything tried to kill us. We learned to fight back." The council members looked at each other with mixed emotions. Fear and hope battled in their hearts. "Prepare coordinates for fleet deployment," the human voice said. "Terra Command is mobilizing our forces. We will arrive in your space within 72 hours." The transmission ended. The chamber fell silent. They had asked for help from unknown predators, and the predators had said yes. "What have we done?" whispered Velara. Kilara stared at the communication screen. Outside the station, she could see the first signs of Vextar scout ships approaching. In 3 days, either the council would be saved by their new allies, or they would discover they had invited an even worse fate into their galaxy. But as she watched those distant enemy ships, Kilara felt something she had not felt since her world burned. She felt like prey that had just called for help from an apex predator. The question was, which species would these humans choose to hunt? Admiral Rosa Vega stood on the bridge of the TFS Indomitable and watched the stars bend around them as they dropped out of hyperspace. Through the massive viewing screen, she could see the Galactic Council's emergency station. It looked tiny compared to her battlecruiser. "Admiral, we have 17 different species trying to contact us," reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the communication station. "They all sound very scared." "Open a channel to their leadership," Vega ordered. She had fought in wars across 3 star systems, but this was different. These were not enemies or rivals. These were potential victims asking for protection. The main screen switched to show a 4-armed alien with large, worried eyes. The creature introduced herself as Ambassador Kilara. Behind her, Vega could see other aliens of different shapes and sizes. All of them stared at the human ships with obvious fear and hope. "We thank you for coming," Kilara said in careful translated speech. But we must ask, what do you want in return for your help? Vega had expected this question. Ambassador, we want these Vextar to stop killing innocent people, that's all. The aliens looked confused. One of them, an elderly creature called High Counselor Thresh, stepped forward. You travel across the galaxy to fight a war that is not yours and you want nothing? We want the killing to stop, Vega repeated. On Earth, we have a saying, evil wins when good people do nothing. Dr. Elena Kozlov, the fleet's xenobiologist, had been studying the Council species for 3 days during their journey. She stepped up beside Vega. Admiral, I believe they don't understand our motivation because they evolved differently than we did. Explain, Vega said. Every Council species evolved on worlds without major predators. They never had to develop aggressive instincts for survival. The concept of fighting to protect others is foreign to them. Vega nodded. It made sense. These beings had never needed to learn that sometimes violence was the only way to stop greater violence. They had lived in peace for so long they couldn't imagine any other way. Perhaps we should show them our capabilities, Vega said. They need to understand what they're asking for. The demonstration began an hour later. The human fleet consisted of 12 ships. To the Council members, they looked impossibly massive and heavily armed. What they didn't know was that this was just a small patrol force. Earth's main battle fleets were 100 times larger. These are our standard frigates, Vega explained as 3 smaller human ships moved into formation. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The Council representatives gasped. Their own ships were designed for exploration and trade. They carried no weapons at all. Now observe our tactical doctrine, Vega continued. The frigates suddenly accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible. They moved in perfect coordination, like a pack of hunters surrounding prey. Their weapon systems activated, painting the empty space around them with targeting lasers. In human naval tradition, we practice something called total warfare, Dr. Kozlov explained to the stunned aliens. We fight not just to win, but to make sure our enemy can never threaten anyone again. Ambassador Kilara watched the display, with growing alarm. Your ships move like predators hunting prey. Because that's exactly what they are, Vega said simply. Humanity spent thousands of years fighting wars. We learned that the best way to protect what you love is to make sure your enemies fear to attack it. Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Dr. Nix rushed to her communication station. Vextar ships approaching, 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen fighters. Vega's expression hardened. Finally, we can show you what humans do to bullies. The Vextar ships emerged from hyperspace in an aggressive formation. They were sleek black vessels that looked like giant insects with razor-sharp wings. They had come expecting to find defenseless prey and easy targets. Instead, they found the TFS Retribution, a human frigate that had been waiting at the edge of the system. Commander Lisa Park commanded the Retribution. She had been born on a military station and had never known peace. When she saw the Vextar ships, she felt the familiar surge of combat adrenaline. Enemy vessels, this is Commander Park of the Terran Fleet. You are ordered to withdraw immediately, or face destruction. The Vextar response came in the form of energy weapons fire. Their ships moved to surround the single human frigate, confident in their numerical advantage. They had made a fatal mistake. All weapons, fire at will. Park ordered calmly. The Retribution's main guns opened fire with a sound like thunder. The human weapons were designed based on thousands of years of military engineering. They hit the first Vextar cruiser with enough force to crack its hull like an eggshell. But Park wasn't finished. Instead of staying at a safe distance like any civilized species would do, she ordered her ship forward at ramming speed. The Council members watching from their station couldn't believe what they were seeing. The human ship was flying directly at a vessel 3 times its size, on what appeared to be a suicide run. What is she doing? Gasped Thresh. Something we call aggressive negotiation, Vega replied with a cold smile. At the last second, the Retribution fired its engines in reverse and spun sideways. Its reinforced hull scraped along the Vextar cruiser's side, tearing through armor plating like paper. The alien ship's atmosphere vented into space as it split in half. The remaining Vextar ships tried to escape, but Park had anticipated this. Her ship's computer had calculated their likely retreat routes and positioned weapons accordingly. 2 more cruisers died in explosions of fire and metal. The surviving fighters scattered in terror. They had never seen anything like human warfare tactics. Most species fought at long range with careful, measured exchanges of fire. Humans fought like berserkers, getting close enough to see their enemies' fear. Vextar vessels, this is your final warning, Park announced over the communication channels. Leave this system now or join your friends in the scrap heap. The fighter ships disappeared into hyperspace without another shot being fired. In the council station, the alien representative sat in stunned silence. They had just watched a single human ship destroy 3 enemy vessels using tactics that seemed insane by their standards. Is this how all humans fight? Kilara asked quietly. This was just a patrol skirmish, Vega replied. When we decide to go to war, we bring everything we have. Dr. Kozlov noticed the fear in the aliens' expressions. Admiral, I think we should explain our rules of engagement. They need to understand that we don't fight without limits. Vega nodded. Kilara, I want you to understand something important. Humans have rules about war. We protect civilians. We don't use weapons that cause unnecessary suffering. We don't fight to conquer or enslave. We fight to end the fighting. But your methods are so violent, Thresh said, his voice shaking slightly. Violence in defense of the innocent is not the same as violence for conquest, Vega replied. We learned long ago that sometimes you must fight monsters to protect the people who cannot fight for themselves. Later that day, the council held an emergency meeting. The debate was intense. Some species argued that the humans were too dangerous to trust. Others pointed out that they had just saved the station from certain destruction. They're predators, argued one representative. What if they decide to hunt us next? Then we would already be dead, Kilara said firmly. Their ship could have destroyed this station with a single shot. Instead, they protected us. Meanwhile, on the TFS Indomitable, Vega was receiving reports from her intelligence officers. They had been monitoring Vextar communications during the battle. Admiral, you need to hear this, reported Lieutenant Torres. We intercepted a transmission from the Vextar flagship. Their war prime is requesting information about human capabilities. What did they learn? Vega asked. Everything. Our ship configurations, our weapon systems, our tactical doctrines. But Admiral, there's something else. They accessed historical data about Earth. Vega raised an eyebrow. What kind of historical data? Our wars, Admiral, all of them. World War I, World War II, the colony wars, the Centauri conflicts. They know we've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Dr. Kozlov looked up from her research station. Admiral, this might actually work in our favor. If the Vextar understand that humans wage war against their own species for practice, they might reconsider their strategy. Vega smiled grimly. Let them be afraid. Fear of humans is a healthy thing for species that like to prey on the innocent. But even as she spoke, Vega wondered what they were really getting into. The council species were asking humanity to become their protectors. That was a responsibility that could change everything. On the other side of the galaxy, Vextar War Prime Sektoth studied the data his scouts had gathered. These humans were unlike anything his empire had encountered. They fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive savagery that should not have been possible. Most disturbing was their history. A species that had spent millennia fighting wars against itself had developed tactics and weapons beyond anything the Vextar could imagine. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Sektoth felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid. General Tommy Park stood in the command center of the newly constructed Terran Forward Base on Mirren 7, watching the holographic display show enemy movements across the sector. The base had been built in just 4 days, something the Council species found impossible to believe. General, the alien engineer is here to see you, announced Sergeant Martinez. A young Mirren named Crix entered the command center. He was shorter than most humans, with soft gray fur and large, curious eyes. Unlike the other council species, Crix seemed fascinated by human military technology rather than afraid of it. "General Park, I must ask, how did you build this base? So quickly? Our people need months to construct simple buildings." Park smiled at the young alien's enthusiasm. "Crix, when you're born on a world where everything wants to kill you, you learn to build fast and build strong. This base can survive direct orbital bombardment and keep running." Crix examined the walls with wonder. They appeared to be made of simple metal, but his instruments showed they were actually composed of materials that could repair themselves and adapt to different types of damage. "Your technology seems like magic to us," Crix admitted. "It's not magic, it's necessity," Park replied. "When you spend thousands of years fighting wars, you either learn to build better or you die." On the main display, red dots showed Vextar forces gathering near the outer planets. Intelligence reports indicated they were preparing for a major assault, but something was different about their behavior. They were moving more carefully, taking longer to plan their attacks. Lieutenant Diana Cross approached the general station. She commanded the 7th Special Operations Unit, the first human ground force to operate alongside Council species. Her soldiers were trained for the most dangerous missions in the galaxy. "General, we've completed our assessment of Vextar ground tactics. They're good hunters, but they fight like animals. No real strategy beyond overwhelming force." "What do you recommend?" Park asked. "Hit them where they don't expect it. Night operations, guerrilla tactics. Make them afraid to sleep." Crix listened to this conversation with growing amazement. "You fight in the darkness?" "Humans evolved as both hunters and prey," Cross explained. "We learned to use every advantage we could find. Darkness, weather, terrain. Everything becomes a weapon if you know how to use it." 3 days later, the Vextar made their first major assault on a council world. They attacked Mirren Prime with overwhelming force, expecting the usual quick victory. Instead, they found something they had never encountered before: a prepared defense. The orbital platforms around Mirren Prime had been upgraded with human technology. When the Vextar fleet approached, they met a wall of fire unlike anything they had seen before. Human weapon systems tracked multiple targets simultaneously, firing with precision that seemed impossible. But the real surprise came when Vextar ground forces landed on the planet's surface. Lieutenant Cross and her team were waiting for them. Vextar warriors were impressive by galactic standards. Each one stood 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and claws that could cut through steel. They had never met effective resistance from any ground force. They had never fought humans before. Cross's team struck at night, using tactics developed over centuries of human warfare. They moved through the forest like ghosts, striking at enemy positions and disappearing before the Vextar could respond. Human soldiers wore armor that made them nearly invisible, and weapons that fired without sound or flash. "Contact lost with Squad 7, reported a Vextar commander to his superior. They were investigating strange noises in Sector 12. "Send reinforcements," ordered War Leader Vorth. "Sir, we already sent 2 more squads. They have also gone silent." This was something new. Vextar forces had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy that fought from the shadows. Most species stood and fought in the open, making them easy targets for superior Vextar firepower. Humans fought like predators hunting prey. As dawn broke over the battlefield, the Vextar forces found themselves surrounded by evidence of human tactical superiority. Their supply lines had been cut. Their communication networks were jammed. Their forward positions had been eliminated without triggering a single alarm. But the most disturbing discovery came when War Leader Vorth found the remains of his reconnaissance unit. "They're all unconscious," reported his medical officer. "Not dead unconscious." "Explain." "The humans used some kind of gas weapon. It puts the victim to sleep without causing permanent harm. Very sophisticated." Vorth stared at the sleeping soldiers. This made no sense. Why would an enemy use non-lethal weapons in war? Every species the Vextar had encountered fought to kill or be killed. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of his communications officers had intercepted human tactical transmissions. "Sir, listen to this," the officer said, playing back the recording. Lieutenant Cross's voice came through the speakers clearly. "Tango units are neutralized, prisoners secured for intelligence gathering. Remember, we follow the Geneva Conventions even in alien warfare. Minimum necessary force only." Fourth didn't understand most of the human words, but the meaning was clear. These creatures had rules about how they fought wars. They captured enemies instead of killing them when possible. They had ethical guidelines that limited their actions, even in combat. This was completely alien to Vextar thinking. Back on the TFS Indomitable, Admiral Vega was receiving reports from the ground operation. The news was both good and concerning. "Admiral, General Park's forces have successfully defended Mirren Prime," reported Dr. Kozlov. "But we've encountered an unexpected problem." "Explain." "The Council species are disturbed by our combat methods. They say we fight too aggressively. Some are questioning whether they made the right choice in asking for our help." Vega sighed. She had expected this. Peaceful species would naturally be horrified by effective military tactics, even when those tactics were used to protect them. "What specific concerns do they have?" "They're afraid we enjoy violence too much. They don't understand why we fight at night, why we use camouflage, why we capture enemies for information. To them, these tactics seem dishonorable. And what do our soldiers think about their criticism?" Dr. Kozlov consulted her notes. General Park's response was, and I quote, "We can fight pretty, or we can fight effectively. They need to decide which one they want." Vega smiled slightly. Tommy Park had never been diplomatic, but he was right. Humans had learned warfare in the hardest school possible: survival. Pretty tactics got people killed. Meanwhile, on the Vextar flagship, War Prime Sektoth was studying intelligence reports with growing unease. The humans were not fighting like any species he had encountered. Their tactics were sophisticated and ruthless, but also limited by strange ethical considerations. "They capture our warriors instead of killing them," reported one of his intelligence officers. "Then they provide medical care and food. This behavior makes no sense." "They're testing us," Sektoth concluded, "seeing how we respond to mercy." But privately, Sektoth was beginning to understand something terrible. The humans weren't showing mercy because they were weak. They were showing mercy because they were so strong they could afford to be generous. A species that could fight with such devastating effectiveness while still following moral guidelines was more dangerous than any mindless killer. It meant they could choose when to be merciful and when to be absolutely ruthless. The next test came when Vextar forces attempted to use their signature bioweapon against a human vessel. The poison was designed to kill any oxygen-breathing species. Within minutes, the crew of the TFS Ranger detected the biological agent immediately. Instead of retreating, they activated their ship's emergency protocols and continued fighting. "Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, reported the ship's medical officer. "Biological contamination detected. Crew in affected areas are showing symptoms of respiratory distress. Seal the compromised sections and continue the mission," ordered Captain Williams calmly. The Vextar watched in disbelief as the human ship continued to operate even while part of its crew was being poisoned. The infected humans put on breathing equipment and kept working at their stations. Some collapsed, but others took their places. This was impossible. Every other species had surrendered immediately when exposed to Vextar bioweapons. The fear of death made them unable to function. Humans kept fighting even when they were dying. "Sir," reported a Vextar tactical officer, "the human vessel has eliminated 3 of our cruisers. Their crew is still operating at full effectiveness despite biological contamination." Sektoth stared at the tactical display. These creatures were not normal predators. They were something far worse: intelligent predators who could function under conditions that would break any other species. For the first time in his career, Sektoth began to consider the possibility that the Vextar Empire had chosen the wrong enemy to fight. On Mirren Prime, Crix was having his own revelation about human nature. He had spent the week working alongside human engineers and soldiers, learning about their technology and culture. Diana, he said to Lieutenant Cross during a break in the fighting. May I ask you something personal? Sure, Crix. Why do you fight so hard for people you barely know? Your species could have stayed safely in your own territory. Cross looked out at the battlefield where human and Vextar forces continued their deadly game of cat and mouse. Crix, on Earth we have a saying, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We've learned that if you don't stop bullies, they just find more victims. Crix considered this. But the cost to your people is worth it, Cross finished. Because if we don't stop them here, eventually they'll come for Earth. Better to fight them now, on our terms, than wait for them to grow stronger. That night, as Crix watched human soldiers preparing for another night operation, he finally understood what made them different from the Council species. Humans didn't fight because they enjoyed violence. They fought because they understood that sometimes violence was the only language that bullies understood, and they were very, very good at speaking that language. In his flagship, Sektoth received a disturbing intelligence report. Human forces were gathering throughout the sector, in numbers far larger than originally estimated. What the Vextar had assumed was a small intervention force was actually the advance guard of something much larger. The humans weren't just helping the Council species. They were preparing for total war. Sektoth's tactical computer began running probability calculations for victory against human forces. The results made his blood run cold. For the first time in Vextar history, the probability of victory was less than 50%, and dropping. Fleet Admiral Jiang Wei stood in the command center of Earth's primary orbital defense station, watching the tactical displays show red warning indicators across 3 star systems. The Vextar had made their boldest move yet, a direct attack on humanity's homeworld. Admiral, long-range sensors detect a massive Vextar fleet approaching the Sol system, reported Captain Moore. Initial count shows over 200 vessels, including what appears to be their planet-killer weapon. Zhang studied the tactical display calmly. He had expected this. When predators felt cornered, they always went for the throat. The Vextar believed that destroying Earth would break human resistance across the galaxy. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. Send a message to all Terran forces, Zhang ordered. Priority Alpha. The homeworld is under direct threat. All units are authorized to engage with full force. Captain Lydia Hayes, commander of the experimental vessel TFS Retribution, received the alert while her ship was docked at the Council's research station. She had been working with a brilliant alien scientist named Ori, combining human and Council technologies to create new weapon systems. Ori, how long until the new fusion weapons are ready? Hayes asked. The small crystalline alien worked frantically at the control console. Ori's species, the Kavek, were natural engineers who could understand any technology they encountered. Captain Hayes, the weapons will be ready in 6 hours. But they are untested. We don't know if they will work. They'll work, Hayes said, with confidence. Human weapons always work when we need them to. Ori had been studying human military technology for weeks and still found it difficult to understand. Human weapons were not just tools for destruction. They were expressions of human determination. Every system had backup systems. Every backup had redundancies. It was as if humans expected everything to go wrong and prepared accordingly. Captain, may I ask you something? Ori said as they worked. Your people could evacuate Earth and hide in distant systems. Why do you choose to fight instead? Hayes paused in her work. Ori, Earth isn't just where humans come from. It's where we learn to be human. Every mountain, every ocean, every city holds our history. We don't abandon our history. But there was more to it than sentiment. Hayes knew something that the Vextar had failed to understand. Earth wasn't just humanity's homeworld. It was humanity's ultimate fortress. Everything that looked like a peaceful civilian installation had a hidden military purpose. The proof came when the Vextar fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. War Prime Sektoth had brought his empire's most powerful weapons to destroy the human homeworld. The planet-killer device alone could crack a world's crust and boil away its oceans. No species had ever survived its use. Begin the approach to the third planet, Sektoth ordered. Prepare the planet killer for firing sequence. His tactical officer studied the sensor readings. Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures throughout the system. The humans appear to have more defensive installations than our intelligence indicated. Sektoth wasn't concerned. Every species tried to defend their homeworld. It never mattered. The Vextar had overwhelming firepower. The first surprise came when they passed the orbit of the outer planets. What had appeared to be mining stations and research facilities suddenly activated, revealing themselves to be heavily armed defensive platforms. The civilian installations began firing with weapons more powerful than most military vessels. Sir, we're taking heavy casualties from the outer defense ring, reported his weapons officer. These installations are much more heavily armed than expected. Continue the advance, Sektoth ordered. We have superior numbers. The second surprise came when they reached the asteroid belt. Thousands of small objects that had appeared to be natural rocks suddenly came alive, revealing themselves to be automated weapons platforms. The entire asteroid field was actually a minefield that had been disguised to look like natural debris. How many weapons do these creatures have? Demanded Sektoth as his fleet fought through waves of automated defenses. His intelligence officer was studying the tactical displays with growing alarm. Sir, I don't think we're fighting a military force. I think we're fighting an entire civilization that has been converted into a weapon. The third surprise came when they reached Mars. The red planet's surface was covered with what appeared to be terraforming equipment and research stations. When the Vextar fleet approached, the entire planet revealed its true nature. Mars had been converted into a fortress world. Every structure on its surface was actually a weapons platform. The planet itself was a gun pointed at anyone who dared to threaten Earth. Sir, we've lost 60% of our fleet, reported the tactical officer. Should we retreat? Sektoth's pride wouldn't allow retreat. Fire the planet killer at Earth. End this now. The massive weapon charged up, drawing power from the entire Vextar fleet. It was designed to destroy any planet with a single shot. Nothing had ever survived its destructive force. The weapon fired. A beam of pure energy, bright as a star, lanced across space toward Earth. It carried enough power to split continents and boil oceans. Every previous target had died in minutes when struck by this ultimate weapon. Earth's moon moved. What the Vextar had assumed was a natural satellite suddenly revealed its true nature. The entire lunar surface opened like a flower, exposing the massive technological complex hidden beneath. Earth's moon had been converted into the largest defensive weapon in human space. The planet killer beam struck the lunar fortress and simply disappeared. The moon's defensive systems absorbed the energy and redirected it back toward the Vextar fleet with twice the original power. Impossible, whispered Sektoth as he watched his ultimate weapon turned against his own forces. Half of his remaining fleet vanished in a burst of redirected energy. But Admiral Zhang wasn't finished demonstrating human defensive capabilities. Activate the Sol defense grid, he ordered calmly. Throughout the solar system, installations that had been hidden for decades came online. The space between planets filled with energy barriers and weapon platforms. What the Vextar had thought was empty space was actually a carefully designed killing field. Sir, reported Captain Moore, the enemy fleet is trapped within our defensive perimeter. They cannot retreat. Good. Now show them what happens when you threaten a Deathworlder's home. Meanwhile, Captain Hayes and her crew aboard the Retribution were approaching the battlefield with their experimental weapon systems. Ori had successfully combined human military engineering with Council energy manipulation technology. The result was something neither species could have created alone. Captain, the fusion cannon is ready, reported her weapons officer. But Ori warns that this is still experimental technology. Hayes looked at the alien scientist who had become her partner in this desperate project. Ori, will it work? The crystalline being's surface flickered with nervous energy. Captain Hayes, this weapon combines human aggressive design with Council precision energy control. In theory, it should be devastatingly effective. Theory is good enough for me, Hayes said. Target the Vextar flagship. The Retribution's new weapon fired, and space itself seemed to bend around the energy beam. The shot struck Sektoth's command, ship with surgical precision, cutting through its shields and armor like they were made of paper. But instead of destroying the vessel, the weapon disabled it completely, leaving the crew alive but helpless. "Captain, why didn't we destroy them?" asked her tactical officer. "Because we're not monsters," Hayes replied. "We fight to stop the killing, not to enjoy it." This single action had a profound effect on the watching council representatives. They had seen human weapons capable of destroying entire fleets, but humans chose to show mercy even to their enemies. This was something no other predator species had ever done. Sektoth, trapped in his disabled ship, watched the remainder of his fleet surrender to human forces. He had brought the Empire's greatest weapon to destroy Earth and had instead witnessed the most complete military defeat in Vextar history. But the most disturbing realization was still to come. Admiral Zhang opened a communication channel to the surviving Vextar vessels. "War Prime Sektoth, this is Admiral Zhang of Terra Command. Your fleet is defeated. Your weapons are useless. Your Empire's expansion ends here. You think you have won, human?" Sektoth snarled. "This is only one fleet. The Vextar Empire has thousands of worlds and millions of ships." Zhang's response chilled Sektoth's blood. "War Prime, what you just witnessed was Earth's civilian defense force. Our actual military fleet is currently liberating every world your empire has conquered. Did you really think we would wait for you to attack us?" The tactical display in Sektoth's disabled ship suddenly lit up with new information. Human forces were appearing throughout Vextar space, not as invaders but as liberators. Every world that had been conquered was being freed. Every Vextar military installation was being systematically destroyed. "This is impossible," Sektoth whispered. "No species could coordinate an attack across such a vast area." "You never understood what you were fighting," Zhang continued. "Humans don't just wage war to win battles. We wage war to ensure the war never needs to be fought again." Ori, watching from the bridge of the Retribution, was recording everything for the Council historical archives. The small alien had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A predator species using their abilities to protect rather than conquer. "Captain Hayes," Ori said quietly, "your people are remarkable. You have the power to conquer the galaxy, but you choose to protect it instead." Hayes nodded. "Ori, we learned a long time ago that having power means being responsible for how you use it. Anyone can destroy. It takes wisdom to know when not to." Back on the Council emergency station, Ambassador Kilara was watching the battle reports with amazement. The humans had not only defeated the Vextar attack on Earth, they had simultaneously launched a galaxy-wide liberation campaign. "How many ships do the humans have?" asked High Counselor Thresh. Dr. Kozlov, who had been studying human military organization, consulted her data. "Counselor, what we've seen so far represents approximately 2% of human military capability. They have been preparing for galactic warfare for over a century." The council members sat in stunned silence. The humans had been holding back. Everything they had witnessed, the devastating tactics, the advanced weapons, the impossible defensive systems, had been just a small sample of human military power. "Why didn't they tell us they were so powerful?" asked one representative. Kilara understood. "Because they wanted us to choose them as allies, not fear them as conquerors. They let us see their strength gradually, so we could learn to trust their intentions." The final phase of the battle came when the surviving Vextar forces attempted to escape to their home system. They found human ships waiting for them there too. But instead of the expected slaughter, the Vextar survivors encountered something they had never seen before: human mercy combined with human justice. "Attention, Vextar vessels," came the transmission from the human fleet commander. "This is Admiral Rodriguez of the Terran Liberation Fleet. Your Empire's military capability has been eliminated. Your conquered worlds have been freed. You have a choice to make." "What choice?" Sektoth asked from his disabled command ship. "Join the galactic community as peaceful members, or remain in isolation on your homeworld under monitoring. We will not destroy your people, but we will not allow you to harm others ever again." This offer stunned the Vextar leadership. Every enemy they had ever defeated had fought to the death rather than surrender. The concept of survival after defeat was foreign to them. "Why would you spare us?" Sektoth asked. Admiral Rodriguez's answer would be remembered in galactic history for centuries. "Because we're not you. We don't kill just because we can." The war that had threatened to destroy 17 peaceful civilizations was over. The Vextar Empire had been defeated not just militarily but philosophically. They had encountered a species more powerful than themselves that chose mercy over vengeance. But the galaxy was about to learn that stopping the Vextar was just the beginning. Humanity had revealed itself as the dominant military power in known space. The question now was, what would they do with that power? Admiral Zhang, still standing in Earth's command center, looked out at the stars and wondered the same thing. Humanity had asked for a chance to protect the innocent. Now they had the power to reshape the entire galaxy. The responsibility was overwhelming, but Zhang knew his species would handle it the same way they had handled every challenge in their history. Together, with wisdom and with the understanding that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to protect. The age of human protection over the galaxy had begun. President Maria Santos stood before the largest gathering in galactic history. Representatives from over 50 species filled the Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of Haven Prime. The Galactic Council had grown from 17 peaceful species to an alliance that now included former enemies, liberated worlds, and even reformed Vextar colonies. 6 months had passed since the end of the Vextar War, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. Humanity had emerged as the dominant military power, but they had surprised everyone by refusing to use that power for conquest. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," President Santos began, her voice carried by translation devices to every species present. "We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners in building a better future." In the front row, Ambassador Kilara listened with deep emotion. Her species, the Althari, were slowly rebuilding their homeworld with human help. Where once there had been poisoned wasteland, now there were growing cities and healing forests. Beside her sat Ori, the brilliant Kavik scientist who had become the symbol of human council cooperation. The small crystalline being had spent the past months working with human engineers to share technology between species. "The integration process continues to amaze me," Ori whispered to Kilara. "Human technology makes us stronger, but our precision and energy control makes human technology more efficient. Together we build things neither of us could create alone." High Counselor Thresh, now the elected leader of the new Galactic Alliance, rose to address the assembly. The elderly Mirren had grown stronger over the past months, as if having hope had given him new life. "President Santos speaks truth," Thresh said in his gentle voice. "The humans could have conquered us all after their victory. Instead, they chose to heal the wounds of war and build bridges between former enemies. This was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the new galactic order. Humans had not only defeated the Vextar Empire, they had rehabilitated it. The former warrior species were learning to channel their predatory instincts into peaceful pursuits. Under human guidance, General Tommy Park, now serving as Director of Galactic Peacekeeping Forces, had established training programs where former Vextar soldiers learned to protect rather than conquer. It was a difficult transition, but it was working. "The key," Park had explained to the Council, "is giving them a purpose that uses their natural abilities without harming innocents. Vextar make excellent security forces when they're protecting people instead of hunting them." One example sat in the assembly hall, a former Vextar war leader named Keth, who now commanded a mixed-species peacekeeping unit. His natural hunting instincts had been redirected toward tracking down pirates and slavers who preyed on merchant ships. "I spent 3 decades conquering worlds," Keth had told Park during his retraining. "Now I understand there is greater honor in protecting them." President Santos continued her address, outlining the new structure of galactic civilization. "The Alliance operates on 3 principles that humans have learned over our long history. First, strength must serve justice. Second, diversity makes a stronger than uniformity. Third, peace is not the absence of conflict but the presence of understanding. Admiral Rosa Vega, now commanding the Joint Human Alliance Fleet, watched from the military section. The integration of different species into unified fighting forces had been challenging, but successful. Human tactics combined with alien technologies had created the most effective peacekeeping force in galactic history. But Vega knew the real strength wasn't in their weapons, it was in their purpose. For the first time, the galaxy had a military force that existed purely to protect civilians and stop aggression. Admiral Vega, came a quiet voice beside her. It was Captain Hayes, whose experimental ship had become the prototype for a new class of vessels that every Alliance world was now building. What is it, Captain? Long-range sensors are detecting something interesting. A new species has just achieved faster than light travel. They're sending out their first exploration missions. Vega smiled. Another species ready to join galactic civilization. What do we know about them? They call themselves the Jorvek. Initial scans suggest they're omnivores from a moderate gravity world. No signs of aggressive intentions, but they seem very curious about other life forms. This had become routine over the past months. As word of the peaceful alliance spread through the galaxy, more species were making contact. Some were young civilizations taking their first steps into space. Others were older cultures that had been hiding from the Vextar threat. Dr. Elena Kozlov, now serving as the Alliance's Director of First Contact, had developed protocols for welcoming new species. The process was careful and respectful, designed to avoid the mistakes that had led to conflicts in the past. The most important thing, Kozlov often told her teams, is to let new species choose their own level of involvement. We offer partnership, not membership requirements. Back in the assembly hall, President Santos was addressing one of the most delicate topics of the new galactic order: what to do with humanity's overwhelming military advantage. Some have asked whether Earth will use its military superiority to impose human values on other species, Santos said. The answer is no. Humans have learned that forced unity is not real unity. We will defend any species that asks for protection, but we will not force our way of life on anyone. This policy had been tested several times already. 3 species had chosen to remain independent of the alliance while still maintaining peaceful relations. Humanity had respected those choices and continued normal diplomatic contact. But the most remarkable test had come from an unexpected source: Earth itself. A group of human colonies had petitioned to leave the Terran Federation and join the Alliance as independent members. Instead of refusing, Earth's government had supported their right to self-determination. This had impressed the alien species more than any military victory. A truly strong species, Thresh had observed, is one that can let its own children choose their own path. The technology exchange programs continued to transform galactic civilization. Human engineering combined with council precision had produced medical advances that could heal injuries previously thought impossible. Vextar biological knowledge, redirected from weapons research to medicine, had led to treatments for diseases that had plagued multiple species for centuries. Ori stood to address the assembly about the latest developments. Fellow beings, I'm pleased to report that the joint research stations have achieved breakthrough discoveries in faster-than-light communication. Soon, every world in the Alliance will be able to speak with any other world instantly. This advance would revolutionize galactic civilization. No longer would distant worlds feel isolated or forgotten. The new communication network would allow real-time coordination between species separated by thousands of light years. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The young people of various species were growing up together on integrated worlds, learning each other's languages and customs. A new generation was emerging that thought of itself as galactic citizens rather than members of single species. Crix, the young Mirren engineer who had first worked with humans, now directed a multi-species technical university. His students included humans, Althari, Kavek, reformed Vexitar, and dozens of other species working together on projects their parents' generations could never have imagined. The students teach us as much as we teach them, Crix often said. When Young minds from different species work together. They create solutions none of us would have thought of alone. As President Santos concluded her address, she looked out at the diverse audience and felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Humanity had been offered the chance to become galactic protectors, and they had risen to the challenge. The Alliance grows stronger each day not because we are all the same, but because we are all different, Santos said. Our diversity is our strength. Our unity is our choice. Our future is what we build together. The assembly erupted in approval. Cheers, clicks, whistles, and harmonics from dozens of different species, creating a symphony of unity. But even as they celebrated, new challenges were emerging. The galaxy was vast, and there were still unknown species in distant regions. Some might be peaceful, others might be hostile. The Alliance would need to remain strong to protect the peace they had built. Admiral Vega received a priority message during the celebration. Long-range scout ships had detected signs of an ancient civilization in the galactic core region. The signals were old and strange, unlike anything in the Alliance database. "Admiral," reported the communication officer, "the signals appear to be some kind of warning or message. Translation attempts have failed, but the mathematical components suggest high intelligence." Vega studied the data with interest. The galaxy still held mysteries. "Continue monitoring and analysis. If there's another civilization out there, we need to know whether they're friends or potential threats." As the celebration continued, President Santos stepped outside onto the observation deck. Through the transparent walls, she could see ships from dozens of different species docked at the station. Human vessels worked alongside alien craft in perfect cooperation. Ambassador Kiel-Ara joined her at the viewing wall. "President Santos, may I ask you something that has puzzled my people?" "Of course, Ambassador. Why did humans choose to share power instead of keeping it? Your species could rule the galaxy if you wished." Santos smiled as she watched a human and Vexitar crew working together to repair a damaged freighter. "Kiel-Ara, humans learned long ago that ruling others is not the same as leading them. Real strength comes from helping others become strong. Real security comes from having friends, not subjects. And you truly believe this new alliance will last?" "Nothing lasts forever," Santos replied honestly. "But we're building something based on choice rather than force. That makes it stronger than any empire." In the distance, a new ship was approaching the station. Its design was unfamiliar, but its communication signals were peaceful. Another species was asking to join the growing galactic community. Santos smiled as she watched the unknown vessel approach. The galaxy was full of possibilities, and humanity had chosen to help explore them all as partners rather than conquerors. The age of human protection had become the age of galactic cooperation, and the future looked brighter than ever before as the celebration continued into the night. A message was transmitted to every world in the Alliance and beyond. It was simple but important, carrying humanity's promise to the galaxy. "This is the Galactic Alliance. We are a community of free species, working together for peace and prosperity. We offer friendship to all who come in peace. We offer protection to all who need it. We offer hope to all who seek it. Choose wisely, and choose with knowledge. You are not alone in the galaxy." The message traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not their weapons or their technology, but their promise that no species would ever again face extinction alone. The Deathworlders had answered the call for aid with firepower. But they had given something far more valuable in return, the chance for every species to choose their own destiny in a galaxy where diversity was celebrated and protected. The future had never looked brighter for the children of the stars. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Ambassador Krell stood at the center of the massive chamber, his blue skin pale with fear. Around him sat representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The insect-like Threx clicked their claws nervously. The plant beings from Verdania rustled their leaves in worry. Even the proud warrior race of Corvin kept their heads low. Above them all, a giant screen showed the horrible truth. Planet after planet had been destroyed. Entire star systems were nothing but empty space now. The enemy had consumed everything, leaving only darkness behind. Krell's voice shook as he spoke through the translation device. My fellow beings, we face the end of all we know. The Dark Swarm has taken 47 worlds in just 2 months. Our greatest fleets cannot stop them. The Dark Swarm was unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever seen. They were not just invaders or conquerors. They were devourers. Their ships were alive, growing stronger with each victory. They ate entire planets, turning all life into fuel for their endless hunger. General Voss of the Corvan Empire stood up. His massive frame towered over the other delegates. Our warriors have fought them 5 times. Each battle, we lose more ships. They learn from every attack. They adapt faster than we can change our tactics. The mathematical probability of success grows smaller each day, added the mechanical voice of Unit 7, representing the robotic civilization of Nexus Prime. Current projections show total galactic extinction within 18 months. Fear filled the chamber like a living thing. These were the most powerful beings in known space, and they were helpless. The Dark Swarm's bioships could heal themselves. During battle, their weapons grew deadlier with each encounter. Worst of all, they seemed to share a single mind that learned from every defeat. Elder Mora of the Scholarly Collective raised a thin, webbed hand. There is one option we have not discussed. Intelligence reports speak of a new species in the Outer Rim. They call themselves humans. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Most delegates had never heard of this species. Ambassador Krell checked his datapad quickly. Humans? Those primitives from the Deathworld Sol 3? They barely discovered, faster than light travel 50 of their years ago. Primitives, yes, Elder Mora agreed. But they have done something remarkable. 3 separate pirate fleets that terrorized our trade routes for decades were completely destroyed by human forces. Not defeated, destroyed. The Threx Queen's compound, eyes focused on the Elder. What do you mean by destroyed? I mean the pirates no longer exist as a threat. The humans did not just win battles or capture prisoners. They eliminated the pirate organization so completely that other criminal groups avoid human space entirely. General Voss looked interested for the first time. How do primitives defeat enemies that gave us trouble for years? Elder Mora activated a small holographic display. It showed battle footage that made several delegates turn away in disgust. Human ships fought with tactics that seemed insane. They rammed enemy vessels with their own ships. They sent soldiers in small suits to board enemy vessels and fight hand-to-hand inside them. They used weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum fear rather than just destruction. Their methods are disturbing, Elder Mora continued. They do not follow any known rules of civilized warfare. They seem to view combat as a form of art, a very dark art. The footage showed human soldiers moving through a pirate ship. They did not just defeat the pirates. They hunted them through every corridor, every hiding place. The pirates' final transmissions were screams of pure terror. By the ancestors, whispered Ambassador Krell. They fight like demons from the old myths. Perhaps, said Elder Mora. But demons might be exactly what we need against the Dark Swarm. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone understood what was being suggested. To invite these humans to join the war would be to admit that civilization had failed. It would mean turning to beings who fought without honor or mercy. Unit 7's mechanical voice cut through the silence. Analysis of human combat patterns shows extreme aggression and unconventional tactics. However, their success rate against numerically superior enemies is remarkably high. They are barbarians, Queen Zilla of the Hive Nations declared. We cannot trust such beings with the fate of the galaxy. We cannot trust anyone else with it either, General Voss replied grimly. Our own forces have failed repeatedly. Ambassador Krell looked at the display showing the advancing Dark Swarm. Their bioships moved like a plague across the star map, consuming everything in their path. In just 18 months, they would reach the core worlds where trillions of beings lived. What do we really know about these humans? He asked. Elder Mora brought up more files. They evolved on a world so dangerous that most of our species would die within hours of arriving. Gravity twice our standard, weather systems that can destroy cities, predators that hunt and organize groups, yet humans thrived there. More than thrived, they became the dominant species by being more dangerous than everything else. The images showed the human homeworld. Massive storms that covered entire continents. Creatures with razor-sharp teeth and claws that could tear out through metal. Plants that could kill with a touch. Yet somehow the humans had not just survived but built a civilization on this nightmare world. They make their young learn to fight before they can properly walk, Elder Mora continued. Their entertainment includes simulated combat and stories of war. They have never known a generation without conflict somewhere on their world. What kind of monsters are they? Queen Zilla asked in horror. The kind that survive when nothing else can, General Voss answered thoughtfully. And maybe the kind that can do what we cannot. The vote took 3 hours of debate. Many delegates spoke against the idea. They called it madness to trust such violent beings. Others argued that the humans were too primitive to be truly helpful. But in the end, fear won over pride. The final count was close, but clear. They would contact the humans and ask for their help. As the session ended, Ambassador Krell remained in his seat, staring at the star map. The dark swarm continued its advance, consuming world after world. Soon they would reach the heavily populated sectors where billions would die. He activated his communication device and sent the message that would change everything. A simple request for a meeting with human military leaders. A plea for help from beings they had never taken seriously. Deep down, Krell knew they were making a mistake. Not in asking for help. They had no choice about that. The mistake was thinking. They understood what they were asking for. The humans had destroyed 3 pirate fleets that had terrorized the galaxy for years. They had done it quickly, efficiently, and with methods that chilled the blood of civilized beings. Now they were inviting these creatures to turn their attention to a much larger threat. And once the humans were involved, there would be no controlling what happened next. But the alternative was extinction. So Ambassador Krell sent his message and prayed to whatever gods might listen that they would not regret this decision. In the depths of space, the dark swarm continued its relentless advance, unaware that the galaxy's most dangerous predators were about to take notice of them. The die was cast. The galaxy's fate now rested in the hands of the species they had dismissed as primitive barbarians. Time would tell if that was salvation or doom. Captain Rita Walsh stood on the bridge of the Terran ship Vengeance, watching the strange alien vessel approach. The ship looked like it was made of crystal and light, beautiful in a way that human ships were not. It moved with the grace of a living thing, not the harsh mechanical motion she was used to. Captain, her communications officer called out, "We're getting a message from them. The translation computer is working hard to make sense of it." "Put it through, Wilson." The main screen flickered and showed the face of an alien. It had blue skin and large eyes that seemed to hold great sadness. When it spoke, the words came through the translator in a careful, formal tone. "Greetings, human vessel. I am Ambassador Krell of the Galactic Council. We have traveled far to meet with you. We need to discuss a matter of great importance." Rita studied the alien's face. She had read the files on first contact protocols, but this was her first time actually seeing one of them. "What kind of matter, Ambassador?" The alien's expression grew darker. "A threat to all life in this galaxy. We face an enemy called the Dark Swarm. They destroy entire worlds, consuming all life they encounter. Our combined fleets cannot stop them." Rita's second-in-command, Commander Jack Stone, stepped forward. "And you came to us because?" "Because," the ambassador hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, "your species has shown ability to defeat enemies using methods that others cannot or will not employ." Rita almost smiled at that. "You mean because we fight dirty?" "We would not use such crude language," the ambassador replied quickly. "But your tactics against the pirate organizations were highly effective. We have studied the reports." "What reports?" Commander Stone asked suspiciously. The ambassador activated something on his end, and the screen split to show recorded footage. Rita recognized it immediately. The final battle against the Red Skull pirates 3 months ago. The footage showed Human ships charging directly into enemy formations, ramming and boarding actions that most civilized species would consider suicide. Your forces achieved total victory against enemies that had troubled us for years, the ambassador explained. The pirates were not simply defeated but completely eliminated. Other criminal organizations now avoid human space entirely. Rita watched herself on screen, leading a boarding party through the pirate flagship. The combat was brutal and personal, nothing like the clean, distant battles that other species seem to prefer. She saw the moment when the pirate captain surrendered and her own cold response. There would be no prisoners taken. "I see you've done your homework," she said. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" "Attend a briefing on the Dark Swarm threat, learn about our enemy, consider whether humanity would be willing to join our fight." Commander Stone looked at Rita with concern. These aliens were clearly desperate to come asking humans for help. The question was whether this was an opportunity or a trap. "Send us the coordinates for your briefing," Rita decided. "But understand something, Ambassador. If we agree to help, we do things our way. No interference, no second-guessing our methods." The aliens seemed to struggle with this. "Your way of fighting is quite different from ours." "That's the point," Rita replied. "You said your way isn't working." After the transmission ended, Wilson turned from his console. "Captain, are you sure about this? Getting involved in alien politics could be dangerous." Rita looked out at the stars. Humanity had spent decades exploring space, finding it mostly empty or populated by species that looked down on them as primitives. Now these same species were asking for help. "Wilson, what's the first rule of human expansion into space?" "Never turn down useful intelligence on potential threats," he recited. "Exactly. If there's something out there destroying entire civilizations, we need to know about it. And if we can gain some respect from these aliens in the process, even better." Commander Stone pulled up tactical displays of their current fleet positions. "The 13th Fleet is still in the outer sectors. If this turns into something bigger, we could call them in." Rita nodded. The 13th Fleet was humanity's newest and most advanced battle group. It was also crewed entirely by veterans of the Pirate Wars, soldiers who understood that sometimes the only way to end a threat was to make sure it never came back. "Set course for the meeting coordinates," she ordered. "But keep the fleet on standby. Something tells me this is going to be more complicated than a simple briefing." 3 days later, they arrived at the designated meeting point. What Rita saw there made her understand just how serious this situation was. Ships from dozens of different species hung in space around a massive station. Some looked like living creatures, others like geometric crystals or metallic sculptures. But all of them had one thing in common. They looked worried. "Captain," Wilson reported, "we're being given docking instructions. They want to meet in person." "Full security detail," Rita ordered. "And keep our weapons powered but not targeted. Let's see what we're walking into." The station's interior was a marvel of alien architecture. Curved passages that seemed to flow like water, lighting that adjusted automatically to each species, needs and artificial gravity that somehow worked differently in each section. Rita's security team stayed close, their hands never far from their weapons. The meeting room was enormous, designed to accommodate beings of vastly different sizes and shapes. Rita and her officers were seated at one end of a table that could have held 100 people. Around them sat creatures from nightmares and dreams, some beautiful beyond description, others so alien that looking at them hurt. Ambassador Krell stood at the center, activating a holographic display. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, the Dark Swarm has consumed 49 worlds since our last meeting. They continue to advance toward the core systems." The display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Rita could see the swarm's path of destruction, a growing dark stain that consumed everything in its path. The scale was hard to comprehend, entire solar systems simply gone. "Tell me about their ships," Rita said, breaking the formal atmosphere. A new alien stepped forward, this one looking like it was made of living rock. "I am General Voss. The enemy vessels appear to be biological in nature. They heal damage during combat, adapt to our weapons, and grow stronger with each victory," Rita studied the tactical data with professional interest. Command structure? Unknown. They seem to share information instantly across vast distances. Destroying individual ships has no effect on their coordination. Weaknesses? We have found none that persist. Any advantage we gain disappears after one battle. Rita stood up and walked around the table, studying the display from different angles. Her security team tensed, but she waved them back. She could feel the aliens watching her, trying to read her expressions. "You've been fighting them like they're machines," she said finally. "But if they're really alive, really biological, then they have something machines don't." "What?" asked a crystalline being that sparkled when it spoke. Rita's smile was cold and predatory, an expression that made several aliens unconsciously move away from her. Instincts, fear, the ability to learn that some things are too dangerous to fight. The room fell silent. Rita could see understanding dawning in some of the alien faces and horror in others. Ambassador Krell spoke carefully. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Rita replied, "that you've been trying to defeat them. We don't defeat enemies. We teach them to be afraid." The aliens looked at each other with growing alarm, finally beginning to understand what they had invited to their war. The War Council had been meeting for 6 hours, and Ambassador Krell could feel the weight of desperation in the air. Representatives from 12 species sat around the massive holographic display, watching as the dark swarm's advance continued across their star maps. Every few minutes another world would go dark, consumed by the enemy. Captain Rita Walsh sat with her human officers at the far end of the table. Krell noticed how the other species unconsciously avoided sitting too close to them. There was something unsettling about the humans, a cold intensity that made even the warrior races uncomfortable. Admiral Zenth of the Corvin fleet activated a new section of the display. "As you can see, they have breached the Helix defense line. 37 ships lost, including our flagship Glory of Corvin. The enemy absorbed the wreckage and grew stronger." The humans studied the tactical data with professional interest. Commander Stone leaned forward, his voice cutting through the formal discussion. "Show us their attack patterns from the last 3 engagements." "Why do you need that information?" asked Queen Lisa of the Crystal Coalition, her translucent body flickering with nervous energy. "Because," Captain Walsh answered, "patterns mean behavior. Behavior means we can predict what they'll do next." The display shifted to show battle recordings. The dark swarm ships moved like a living creature with 1,000 parts. They flowed around defensive positions, struck weak points with surgical precision, and retreated before counterattacks could be organized. Major Torres, the human tactical officer, pointed at specific formations. "There, they always retreat along the same vectors. And here, they never pursue fleeing ships beyond a certain distance." "So?" General Voss asked, not understanding the significance. "So they have rules," Torres replied. "Instincts built into their biology. That makes them predictable." Elder Nix, of the Scholarly Union, raised an objection. "We have studied their patterns extensively. Any tactical advantage disappears after one engagement. They adapt too quickly." Captain Walsh stood up, walking around to study the display from different angles. "You're thinking about this wrong. You keep trying to outthink them, outmaneuver them. But what if the goal isn't to beat them in battle?" "What other goal could there be?" Queen Lysa asked, confused, "making them not want to fight us in the first place?" The room fell silent. Several delegates looked at each other with growing concern. Ambassador Krell spoke carefully. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Psychological warfare," Walsh replied matter-of-factly. "Terror tactics. Make them afraid to engage human forces. The B." Crystalline Queen's light flickered in shock. "But that's barbaric." "No," Commander Stone corrected. "That's effective. And apparently that's what you need." Admiral Zenth leaned forward, interested despite himself. "How would such tactics work against a hive mind?" Major Torres activated his own datapad, bringing up files that made several aliens turn away in disgust. "Fear is a survival mechanism. Even hive minds need to protect themselves. If we make engaging us more costly than avoiding us, they'll choose avoidance." The files showed recordings from human conflicts with pirates, The footage was disturbing, not because of the violence, which was actually quite restrained by human standards, but because of the psychological impact. Pirates who survived encounters with human forces were broken, traumatized beings who refused to speak of what they had experienced. "We don't just defeat enemies," Walsh explained. "We make examples of them." Other pirates learned to avoid human space not because they couldn't win fights with us, but because they didn't want to find out what we would do to them if they lost. Elder Nix accessed his own database. The reports from pirate territories support this. Criminal organizations actively warn their members against entering human space, not because of superior firepower, but because of what humans do to captured pirates. "What do you do to them?" Queen Lysa asked, though she seemed afraid to hear the answer. The humans exchanged glances. Captain Walsh answered simply, "We make sure they understand that attacking human civilians was a mistake they'll never want to repeat." The implication hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. The aliens were beginning to understand that humanity's reputation for brutality wasn't exaggerated. It was carefully cultivated. General Voss, being a warrior himself, was the first to grasp the full concept. "You would torture the Dark Swarm? We would teach them," Commander Stone corrected. "The same way we teach any predator that humans are not prey." Ambassador Krail felt a chill run through his body. "How do you teach a hive mind to fear?" Major Torres smiled, and the expression was terrifying. "By giving it something to fear. These bioships are alive, right? They feel pain, they can be hurt. A hive mind that shares all experiences would share trauma too." The horrible logic was undeniable. If the Dark Swarm truly shared a collective consciousness, then traumatizing one unit would traumatize them all. The psychological impact would be multiplied across their entire species. "This is monstrous," Queen Lysa declared. "We cannot condone such methods." "Then you can continue losing," Walsh replied without emotion. "Your choice." Elder Nix brought up the population projections. At current consumption rates, the Dark Swarm will reach the core worlds in 14 months. 30 trillion lives will be at risk. The number was too large to comprehend. Entire civilizations would be consumed, turned into fuel for the enemy's endless hunger. Admiral Zenth studied the human officers with new understanding. "If we agree to this, what would you need from us?" "Complete tactical control of the engagement," Walsh answered immediately. "No interference, no second guessing, no moral objections during the operation." "And if your methods fail, General?" Voss asked. "Then you're no worse off than you are now, but they won't fail." The confidence in her voice was absolute. These humans weren't hoping their plan would work. They knew it would. Ambassador Krell looked around the table at his fellow delegates. He could see the same struggle in all their faces. Everything they believed about civilization, about the proper way to conduct warfare, was being challenged, but the alternative was extinction. "We need time to discuss this among ourselves," he said finally. "You have 6 hours," Walsh replied, checking her chronometer. "After that, we return to human space and prepare our own defenses." As the humans left the chamber, the remaining delegates sat in stunned silence. They had asked for help from a species they considered primitive. Now they understood that humanity wasn't primitive at all. They were something far more dangerous. They were predators who had learned to use fear as a weapon, and they were offering to turn that weapon against the Dark Swarm. The question was whether the cure would be worse than the disease. Outside the chamber, Captain Walsh spoke quietly to her officers. "Think they'll agree?" "They'll agree, Commander," Stone replied. "They're too scared not to. And when they see what we're really capable of, then they'll be scared of us too. Which is exactly how it should be." The die was cast. The galaxy's fate would be decided by the species everyone had underestimated. The species that had turned fear itself into an art form. 2 weeks after the War Council, the first joint operation began in the Meridian system. Admiral Sarah Cross stood on the bridge of the human flagship Nightmare, watching as the alien coalition fleet maintained a safe distance from the battle zone. The arrangement was simple. The aliens would observe while humanity demonstrated their methods against the Dark Swarm. The enemy had consumed 4 planets in this system already. Their bioships hung around the 5th planet like a disease, feeding on what remained of the civilization that once lived there. Intelligence counted at least 300 enemy vessels, their organic hulls pulsing with stolen life energy. Alien fleet is holding position at 20,000 kilometers, reported Lieutenant Kim Park from the sensor station. They seem nervous. Admiral, Cross smiled coldly. They should be. Today they learn why the galaxy's criminals fear us. The human fleet was smaller than the alien coalition forces, but built for a different kind of warfare. Where alien ships prioritized shields and long-range weapons, human vessels were designed for close combat and psychological impact. They looked like predators, sharp angles, dark hulls, and weapon systems that seemed hungry for violence. Commence Operation Terror, Cross ordered. What happened next would be studied and feared throughout the galaxy for generations to come. The human fleet didn't engage in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they deployed weapons that no civilized species had ever conceived of, pure psychological warfare on an industrial scale. The first wave consisted of broadcaster ships that began transmitting carefully crafted signals directly into the Dark Swarm's communication network. The signals contained sounds, images, and frequencies designed to trigger fear responses in biological minds. Human scientists had studied the enemy's neural patterns and created a weapon that attacked their consciousness itself. The effect was immediate. The perfectly coordinated Dark Swarm formations began to waver. Individual bioships started exhibiting erratic behavior, breaking formation and fleeing in random directions. Phase 2, Admiral Cross commanded. Hunter-killer squadrons of small human fighters began targeting isolated enemy vessels. But they weren't trying to destroy them. That would be too quick, too merciful. Instead, they disabled critical systems and left the bioships drifting helpless in space, broadcasting distress signals that their hive mind couldn't ignore. Commander Blake Rodriguez led one of these squadrons, his voice crackling over the comm system as he reported his progress. Enemy bioship disabled and secured, moving to boarding procedures. The alien observers watched in horror as human marines launched themselves through space, using cutting tools to breach the organic hulls of enemy ships. What happened inside? Those vessels wasn't visible to outside sensors, but the screams that echoed across all communication frequencies told the story. Ambassador Krell, monitoring from the alien fleet, felt his blood freeze as he listened to the sounds coming from the captured bioships. Admiral Cross, what are your people doing to them? Teaching them, came the cold reply. Stand by for Phase 3. The captured bioships began broadcasting something new through the Dark Swarm's neural network. Not just distress calls, but actual experiences of terror, pain, and hopelessness. The humans had learned to turn the enemy's greatest strength, their shared consciousness, into their greatest weakness. For the first time in recorded history, the Dark Swarm experienced true fear. The transformation was remarkable and terrifying. Bioships that had fought with mechanical precision began fleeing in panic. The hive mind that had conquered dozens of civilizations was suddenly flooded with emotions it had never felt before: vulnerability, desperation, and the primal urge to escape. Enemy fleet is breaking formation, Lieutenant Park reported, her voice filled with amazement. They're actually running away. But Admiral Cross wasn't finished. Deploy the hunters. The final phase was the most disturbing. Fast human ships began pursuing the fleeing Dark Swarm vessels, not to destroy them, but to herd them. Like wolves hunting prey, they drove the bioships toward specific locations where more human forces waited. What followed was a carefully orchestrated campaign of psychological destruction. Every Dark Swarm ship that was caught was subjected to the same treatment: disabled, boarded, and turned into a broadcasting station for terror. The hive mind that had once been their strength became a network for spreading trauma. General Voss, watching from his command ship, could hardly believe what he was seeing. They're not just winning, they're breaking them completely. The Dark Swarm forces that had seemed unstoppable just hours before were now in full retreat. But the humans weren't letting them escape cleanly. They followed at a distance, always visible, always threatening, making sure the enemy never forgot what had happened here. Ambassador Krell tried to contact Admiral Cross again. "Admiral, surely this is enough. They're fleeing the system." "Not yet," Cross replied. "They need to learn that attacking any inhabited world brings consequences they can't survive." The human fleet continued its psychological assault for another 6 hours. By the end, the few Dark Swarm ships that managed to escape carried with them something their species had never known: the absolute certainty that humans were more dangerous than anything they had ever encountered. Major Torres monitored the enemy communications as they fled. They're transmitting warnings to other Dark Swarm units, telling them to avoid any system with human presence. Commander Rodriguez's boarding teams had returned to their ships, their mission complete. "Sir, the captured bioships are still broadcasting. The psychological payload will continue spreading through their network for days." Admiral Cross nodded, with satisfaction. "Excellent. Let them carry our message to every corner of their territory." The alien observers were stunned into silence. They had witnessed something unprecedented: an entire Dark Swarm fleet numbering in the hundreds of ships defeated by a smaller human force without losing a single vessel. But the victory came with a terrible realization. The methods humanity had used were so brutal, so psychologically devastating, that even their allies were horrified. Queen Lisa's voice trembled as she transmitted to the human fleet. "Admiral Cross, what you've done here today, it's beyond anything we imagined possible." "It's what you asked for," Cross replied without emotion. "An end to the Dark Swarm threat. But the cost is acceptable. The enemy will think twice before attacking inhabited worlds again." Elder Nix accessed the battlefield data, trying to understand what he had witnessed. "Admiral, how did you know their psychological vulnerabilities?" "We studied them," Cross answered. "Every species has fears built into their biology. We just figured out how to weaponize those fears." The implications were staggering. If humans could do this to the Dark Swarm, what could they do to other species? The aliens had solved their immediate problem, but they were beginning to realize they might have created a much bigger one. As the human fleet prepared to leave the Meridian system, Ambassador Krell sent a final transmission. "Admiral, we are grateful for your assistance, but we must ask, are there limits to what humanity will do to win?" Admiral Cross's response chilled every alien who heard it. "Ambassador, you asked us to save the galaxy from the Dark Swarm. We did that. What you should be asking is whether you're prepared for what comes next." "What comes next?" "Now that we've proven ourselves, now that we've shown what we're capable of, the galaxy has to decide what kind of neighbors they want humans to be." The transmission ended, leaving the alien fleet alone in space with the wreckage of what had once been an unstoppable enemy. They had won the battle. But as they watched the human ships disappear into hyperspace, they realized the war had only begun. The Dark Swarm had been the galaxy's greatest threat for months. Now, in the span of a single day, humanity had become something far more dangerous, the species that other species would learn to fear. The predators had become the apex predators, and the galaxy would never be the same. 8 months after the Meridian system victory, the Galactic Council faced a new crisis. The emergency session was smaller this time, only the most senior delegates present. The massive chamber felt empty and cold, filled with an atmosphere of fear that had nothing to do with the Dark Swarm. Ambassador Krell stood before the assembled representatives, his hands shaking as he read from his datapad. "The Dark Swarm has withdrawn completely from the Outer Rim territories. No attacks have been reported in over 4 months. By all measures, the threat has been eliminated." The words should have brought celebration, but the mood in the chamber remained grim. Everyone knew there was more to the story. Admiral Sarah Cross sat at the witness table, flanked by 2 human officers. Her presence filled the vast space with an uncomfortable tension. The other delegates avoided looking directly at her, as if eye contact might provoke some terrible response. Elder Nix activated the central display, showing strategic maps of the galaxy. Admiral Cross, your forces have established permanent bases in 17 systems that were previously Dark Swarm territory. We must ask, what are your intentions? Cross smiled, and every alien delegate felt a chill run through their respective biologies. Our intentions are simple. We're ensuring that threats like the Dark Swarm never emerge again. By occupying sovereign territory, Queen Lysa challenged, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. By securing strategic positions, Cross corrected, the Dark Swarm didn't just disappear. They're still out there, in the deep space between galaxies, monitoring, waiting. General Voss leaned forward, his rocky exterior showing stress fractures. Our intelligence suggests otherwise. All Dark Swarm activity has ceased completely. Cross's second-in-command, Commander David Park, spoke for the first time. Your intelligence is limited to this galaxy. Ours extends beyond it. The implications hit the delegates like a physical blow. Not only had humanity defeated the Dark Swarm, they had developed capabilities that surpassed the entire galactic community. Ambassador Krell struggled to maintain diplomatic protocol. Admiral, we appreciate everything humanity has done for galactic security, but the Council has concerns about your expanding military presence. What kind of concerns? Cross asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Elder Nix brought up classified reports that made several delegates squirm in their seats. Since the Meridian victory, crime rates in sectors adjacent to human space have dropped to unprecedented levels. Pirate activity has virtually ceased. Even legitimate military exercises by member species are being curtailed. Sounds like progress, Commander Park observed. It sounds like intimidation, Queen Lysa countered. Other species are afraid to operate their own fleets normally because they don't want to accidentally provoke human attention. Cross stood up, her movement causing every security guard in the chamber to tense. Let me understand this correctly. You're complaining because we've made space safer? We're concerned, Ambassador Krell said carefully, because fear is not the same as peace. Fear is more reliable than peace, Cross replied. Peace is a temporary condition between wars. Fear is a permanent deterrent to conflict. The chamber fell silent. The aliens were finally hearing the truth they had been dreading. Humanity didn't see their victory over the Dark Swarm as the end of a crisis, but as the beginning of a new order. General Voss tried a different approach. Admiral, surely you understand our position. We asked for help with a specific threat. That threat has been eliminated. Why do human forces remain in our territory? Because, Cross said, walking around the chamber like a predator circling prey, the galaxy has proven it cannot defend itself. The Dark Swarm was just one threat. There could be others. What others? Elder Nix demanded. Cross stopped walking and faced the assembled delegates. Each other. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Every delegate understood the implication. Humanity had decided that the various species of the galaxy were potential threats to each other and to themselves. Commander Park activated his own datapad, displaying files that made the delegates recoil in horror. We've analyzed historical conflicts between council species, wars, territorial disputes, resource conflicts. The patterns are clear. Left to your own devices, you'll eventually destroy each other. That's our choice to make. Queen Lysa protested. Not anymore, Cross said simply. You forfeited that right when you asked us to save you from the Dark Swarm. Ambassador Krell felt the blood drain from his face. What are you saying? I'm saying that humanity has decided to take a more active role in galactic affairs. For everyone's protection, of course. The truth was finally out. The aliens had expected to gain allies against the Dark Swarm. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. A species that viewed the entire galaxy as their responsibility to manage. Elder, Nix tried one last diplomatic approach. Admiral, perhaps we can reach some kind of arrangement. Limited human presence in exchange for security guarantees. Cross's laugh was cold and mechanical. Elder, You still don't understand. This isn't a negotiation. This is an explanation. And explanation of what? Of how things are going to work from now on. The chamber erupted in panicked chatter as the full scope of humanity's intentions became clear. They weren't just occupying former Dark Swarm territory. They were positioning themselves as the galaxy's new rulers. General Voss rose to his feet, his warrior instincts finally overcoming diplomatic caution. And if we refuse to accept human authority? Cross looked at him with something that might have been pity. General, you've seen what we did to the Dark Swarm. They were a species that consumed entire civilizations for food. What do you think we would do to species that simply disagreed with us? The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Humanity had proven they could break the will of any enemy, no matter how powerful. The choice facing the galaxy was simple: cooperation or conquest. Ambassador Krell made one final attempt at diplomacy. Admiral, surely we can find a peaceful solution, some form of partnership. We have found a solution, Cross replied. The galaxy will be peaceful. We'll make sure of it. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Cross delivered her final message. You have 30 days to adjust your military deployments and territorial claims to align with human security requirements. Detailed instructions will be transmitted to each member world. And if we refuse? Elder Nix asked, though he seemed afraid to hear the answer. Then you'll discover why the Dark Swarm chose to flee rather than continue fighting us. The chamber fell silent as the humans departed. The assembled delegates sat in stunned horror, finally understanding the true cost of their desperate gambit. They had saved the galaxy from the Dark Swarm, but they had doomed it to something potentially worse, rule by the species that had turned warfare into an art form and fear into a governing principle. The galaxy was safe from external threats. The question now was whether it would survive its protectors. In the depths of space, human fleets continued their silent patrol of territories that had once belonged to proud, independent civilizations. The Dark Swarm was gone, but humanity remained, watching, waiting, and ready to remind anyone who forgot that they were now the apex predators in a galaxy full of prey. The age of galactic independence was over. The age of human dominance had begun, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it.